What's up, my fellow light lover? 3-point lighting interviews are the bread and butter of the film industry. But did you know that those same principles can be applied to light scenes on a commercial or narrative shoot? Using the framework that I outlined in my cinematic on-location interview tutorial, link in the description of course, today's commercial lighting breakdown will be a step-by-step guide showing you how I lit a 2-day commercial shoot for Lighthouse Ranch. It would be pretty hard to understand what's happening without watching the 2 commercials that we filmed, so let's see what those look like.
1 2 1 2, mic check. We're the fridge's number uno, we're the Ranchy MVP. If that dip sits in the pantry, better take it off the team. Cause mustard must have fumbled, they say mayo got no chance. All that ketchup better catch up, cause it ain't no Lighthouse Ranch. There's no fumble with our flavor, there's no penalty about. Only creamy, fridgy, herby, tasty, yummy, tangy, dippy, dunky, freaky, savory, crazy, ranchy, Lighthouse in the house. These sauces saying they the best, we're way too cold for all that heat. Serving flavor out on decks, holding condiments in check, I mean yum. You're talking flavor, let us cater, got some Lighthouse in the house. Tell those other sauces catch up, cause they're playing cat and mouse. Every other condiment, yeah, they wanna be this cool. Produce section for the win, Lighthouse take them all to school. Lighthouse in the house.
This shoot couldn't have happened without a wonderful team. So I'd like to thank everyone who helped create this one, especially McKee Grip Eric Fulcher, our art director Jesse Capstick, the DP Justin Baylog, our Steadicam operator Kevin Andrews, and most importantly, the co-directors who brought us all together, Woody Roseland and Chad Neat. And without further ado, says the guy that's like 3 minutes into this video or something, let's hop into it. In case you haven't watched my cinematic interview tutorial, or you just would like a quick refresher on it, let's recap the step-by-step process that I introduced in that video. First, we need to know where our talent is going to be placed and where the camera is going to be looking. Everything else is going to revolve around those first 2 critical decisions. After our framing and blocking has been established, we'll get the key light up and looking how we want it. Then, we'll fill in the shadow side of our talent to get the ratio that we're looking for. Next, providing our talent with a little kicker from behind will help separate them from the background. If necessary, we can introduce a light or lights to get us the desired brightness level of the background or rest of the frame. And last, we'll want to add some eye candy to our frame using practical lighting, which helps bring the frame to life. As we cover the 3 main scenes featured in these 2 commercials, you'll learn how this 6-step process was applied to light 3 completely different looks. The first scene is the one that barely appears at all in either commercial, but took us the longest to figure out because of the weirdness of the space. We knew that we wanted to film in this corner of the studio that we were working in because the client, Lighthouse Ranch, wanted to have some kind of a record label vibe spot. But shooting directly into the corner and against the wall like this was going to be pretty tricky to make look good. So first things first, let's place our talent and get the frame up. We moved the couch away from the wall and placed the Lighthouse Ranch bar table in the corner near the stairs. Moving the couch from the wall and shooting into the corner like that helped reduce the flatness of the image. The area behind the stairs also has a little more depth to it and is definitely more interesting than if we were to directly shoot into the corner that had a black curtain in it. Once the scene was blocked and the camera framing was established, it was time for Eric and I to position the key light properly. Now, if we push the light directly from camera right into the opposite wall, our talent and the wall would be approximately the same intensity, which would end up with a scene lacking in visual depth. Coming from this direction with the key would also have pushed light frontally directly into the talent's faces, giving them a flat look. So to resolve both of these issues, we decided to place the key light in a far side key position, much further back in the space than directly next to the camera, and to get it as relatively close to the edge of frame right as the space would allow. The Intelitech Mega Light Cloth ended up working perfectly here, as it's a 5x3 bi-color panel that gives a soft look and a compact form factor that made the most of the weird space limitations. This had a grid placed on it to help control the spill from affecting the blue wall. Next, 2 bounces were placed to help fill the shadow areas of our talent sitting on the couch. A 4x4 Ultra Bounce landed just to camera left to fill in the shadow side, and a 4x4 beadboard helps lift the area under the chin. To provide separation for everybody on the couch from the wall, as well as an overhead key for the back table, our key grip Eric built this speed rail rig to enable 2 Aperture Infinibar PB12s to be suspended over the space. These bars were gaff taped on the back, which helped reduce their spill onto the wall, keeping the blue hue nice and saturated. An additional 2-foot bar was placed off camera left to help provide additional separation to the talent on the couch in the foreground. Lastly, 2 lights help to add viewer interest to the scene. A 2-foot Infinibar just behind the couch is adding a splash of light to the Lighthouse Ranch logo on the bar table, and a Kelvin Epos 300 casts a brand-specific blue hue over the back wall, adding color contrast to the warmer hues. This lighting setup is also the same setup used in this insert shot of the wing being dipped into sauce. The tray was placed on the table, the position of the Mega was adjusted, and that's about it. So to recap, we moved the furniture in order to find the most interesting frame in the space. Then, I placed our key light, the Intelitech Mega Light Cloth, in a far side position on camera right. This was bounced back with a 4x4 Ultra Bounce for some shadow fill on the faces closest to camera, and a 4x4 beadboard as a clamshell. A speed rail rig was built overhead to enable 2 bars to be suspended that both separated our talent from the wall and lit the back table area. We then made sure the logo on that back table was lit and visible by using a second 2-foot bar under the couch, and then we washed the background in a brand color. Sounds like the steps for an interview setup to me. Let's move on to the second scene, this live performance scene with the giant LED wall in the background. As difficult as the first one was to light, this second scene was basically the opposite and even required less equipment than we initially planned on. A side tip for anybody that's newer in the industry like me, if you're able to sit down with the DP and review photos from your location scout and talk some diagrams before your shoot day, I definitely recommend it. I've been incorporating this into my workflow since the start of the year, and it not only helps the team look more professional to clients, it makes my set days go so much smoother. Anyway, as you can see in the original diagram that we drew over coffee, Justin and I thought that for the key, we'd need a 1200D punched through an 8x8, then we'd use a 6x6 to help return some fill. Maybe we'd accent that push with the Amaran F22C, and finally we'd use 2 Kelvin Epos 300s as a couple of positionable rear kickers. But no plan survives first contact with the enemy, so what actually happened on set day? We knew the talent was going to be dancing on stage in the general area and that it was going to be a Steadicam shot. So Eric and I knew that we should keep the stage as clear as possible to allow Kevin Andrews, our Steadicam op, and our talent to do their thing. Blocking and framing established. Moving on to the key, we ended up using the Amaran F22C. This was set to the TV effect at 40% intensity because Justin wanted to mimic some of that LED wall behind the talent, kind of wrapping around with our key. We tested the TV effect look with the Aperture 1200D through the 8x8 and the Amaran F22C with no modifier, and we both decided the Amaran F22C provided a convincing TV effect. Also, a slightly harsher shadow kind of matches a live performance better than something super soft, since every stage for a concert is lit with point source lights. So Justin and I were more okay with having a slightly harsher key light shadow than if this were less of a live performance being on a stage type shot. Another consideration was how much time that we'd actually have on shoot day. Because of the amount of coverage that we needed to grab, the team definitely wanted to maximize the time that we were recording and minimize transition time. Using the Amaran F22C as the key would mean G&E could be reset in minutes between scenes, as Eric and I would only have to move the shadow bounce. On to step 3, lifting the shadow side of the main talent's face. A 6x6 ultra bounce was used so that it could return some of the moving light from both the LED wall and the TV effect from the Amaran F22C. Doing this gives a little life and character to the fill, blending it into the scene better than if the fill had been from a static light. Steps 4 and 6 combine into one here. Instead of needing the EPOS 300s as rear kickers to separate the talent from the background, we were able to use the installed location lighting. We also occasionally see these lights in frame as practicals that help to sell the stage setting. We skipped step 5 altogether since we didn't need any additional space fill to this scene. So again, Justin blocked and framed the shot so that we knew where we were going to be lighting. The key light was decided upon and placed in Amaran F22C in TV effect mode. A 6x6 ultra bounce acts as shadow fill, and some installed location lighting does double duty as both rear kickers and eye candy practicals. This last scene was easily the most involved out of the 3 to build and film, but it was also the funnest for me to gaff because I got to play with so many lights on DMX-Q. And despite the size of the space, it still follows the 6-step rubric that we've been following. This one took place in a simulated grocery aisle that had to be built from scratch. So after our wonderful art department team built out the produce aisle and neatly arranged everything that you see in frame, it was time for Eric and I to light the space. First, we knew our lead was going to be living in an area about 15 feet in front of the produce shelves, and that he'd be moving around in like a 3-foot diameter area during the master performance take, with a dancer on either side of him and slightly behind. Also, Justin had communicated in our coffee chat that he'd like a soft key light that could be relatively movable and controllable. Meeting both of these conditions would make it easy to get the dozen or so shots that we needed on shoot day. That sounds like step 1, framing and blocking has been taken care of, and we've even been given a nice little guideline for step 2, figuring out our key light. Just like the first scene, the Intelitech Mega Light Cloth on a roller combo stand ended up being the perfect light to use as the key. At 5 feet by 3 feet, the Mega was wide enough to be flattering on our talent, and by placing it on rollers, it was very easy to position this light where we needed it to be in between takes. The light also comes with a grid, which was used to control how much the beam spreads out. Adding a grid also makes the light much easier to feather, which is a technique where a light, usually with a grid, is rotated until it affects the subject but not the area behind them. By combining a grid with feathering, I was able to illuminate the subject while keeping the light cloth from hitting the produce shelving. Without this level of control, our key light would have increased the brightness level of the background of our scene and potentially even added reflective glare spots since the shelving was made of metal. Regardless of where the talent was positioned relative to the set during the take, our key light was positioned off camera right and kept somewhere between frontal and Rembrandt. It was also slightly higher than the talent to simulate the downward angle that we're all used to seeing our lighting coming from. Next, we needed to increase the intensity of the shadow side of our talent's face so that it would appear more evenly lit. To accomplish this, a 6x6 frame with an ultra bounce rag was positioned camera left. The size allowed Eric and I to easily reposition this during takes as necessary, as well as still be large enough to cover a wide space for the talent and Steadicam op to work in. To both pop the subject from the grocery shelving and give general room fill to the area where our talent would be standing, a 1200D with a narrow reflector was pushed into an overhead 8x8 ultra bounce. To get the 8x8 in place, Eric built out this double stacked speed rail rig to spread across the set, which was held up with 2 Mambo combos. The 8x8 was then rigged to that speed rail setup, safety chained, and then tied off to a couple rigging points inside the studio for additional safety. This was angled slightly to help return the light towards set rather than bounce directly towards the back of the room, and had a duvetine skirt hanging off the back of it to further help kill that rear spill. As for the light itself, in order to keep the 1200D from spilling directly into the set, the first flag was placed horizontally in front of the light. And to have equal exposure across the width of the shelving unit, we ended up needing to cut some of the light to the left side with a second flag. Now that we've got the talent and space lit, as well as provided some separation between our main actor and the background, we can move on to adding our practicals as the eye candy you see lighting up the shelves in the back of the frame. To light the produce aisle, 3 Aperture Infinibar PB12s lit the center shelving unit, and 6 MC Pros, 3 to a side, lit the 2 shelving units offset to each side. Because all of these have built-in magnets on the back, they easily stayed in place on the magnetic shelves. The sign above was lit by a 4th bar boomed in from behind the shelving. 2 Kelvin EPOS 300 units were set behind the produce aisle to help add color to the curtains. This added some depth behind our scene in case the DP ever shot beyond the boundaries of the produce aisle, as well as added some brand color to the background. And lastly, 2 of my 2-foot Infinibars were placed on C-stands and set just out of frame behind the dancers. These helped to provide a little background separation between them and the produce aisle when they were in frame. In order to make it easier to record all the takes that we'd need for 2 songs in one day, all of my lights were controlled via blackout lighting console with my Lumen Radio Aurora CRMX transmitter. I was able to save all of the lighting for each song as 2 separate looks and flip back and forth instantly whenever the take called for it. And as a result of having everything on CRMX control, I was also able to program this fun little cue where the lights go from daylight to blue, which was an idea that the client and directors came up with during set day. We also filmed quite a few of our insert shots in this space, including my favorite, the ranch ring dip shot. This dip shot was also filmed here, and this setup is also where the smoke effect insert shot was filmed. The effect was achieved by slowly adding water to a baking pan filled with dry ice. The resulting evaporate was then gently poured over the rim of the baking pan. Okay, I know there was a lot to this scene, so let's quickly cover everything again. Once the blocking and framing had been established, I moved the Intelitech Mega Light Cloth into place for the key. This had a grid on it, which enabled it to be feathered so the beam affected only our talent and not the background. A 6x6 frame with an Ultra Bounce rag returns some of that key as fill. A 1200D bounces off an overhead 8x8 Ultra Bounce to serve as room fill and act as a kicker for the talent. This is cut with 2 flags to help control the beam. 2 Kelvin EPOS 300s were placed behind the cabinets to add the blue hue to the curtains. 3 Infinibars and 6 MC Pros light the produce shelving, and an Infinibar is boomed from behind to light the sign. Lastly, a couple 2-foot Infinibars are used to separate the dancers from the background as necessary. Simple as that. Now that you've seen how the process for lighting an interview can be applied to lighting larger scenes, I hope that you feel more confident walking into any location and lighting your own sets. Just remember, Step 1, find your framing and blocking. Step 2, place your key and control it if necessary. Step 3, balance the shadow side of your talent with bounce or negative fill. 4, add separation to the talent from the background. Step 5, lift the room levels if necessary with an additional light or lights. And Step 6, add some eye candy to your frame with practicals. 6 simple steps to make any frame cinematic, not just your interviews. And if you're wondering why I didn't cover a few of the scenes, either I wasn't involved in lighting them because they were shot with a skeleton crew, or they were assets that Lighthouse Ranch had from previous commercial shoots. And to see how I lit this 60-second commercial for a tech company in a rent-by-hour office space, make sure you click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.